Dr. Anne McCloskey. Pleasure to have you today.
Good to be here in the
You,
wilds of Burnfoot.
yes, you have been suspended for another 12 months. What has happened?
Yeah, as of, I think, was it, what day is the day?
Thursday.
Thursday, yeah. I think as of Tuesday I got the news. I mean, I kind of knew that. I have been suspended since September 2021 by the General Medical Council, which is a regulatory body which essentially at the moment is used to censor doctors who object to government policy. And as I say, it's been an interesting journey. I had retired. I've just brief recap of my life. Qualified from University College Dublin in 1981. Yikes, it's a long time ago. And then I worked in paediatrics and in community paediatrics, Belfast and Derry. And then became a general practitioner because I really wanted to have my own family, and that seemed to fit better than with hospital medicine. So I was a GP in Shantallow in Derry for 30 odd years, and it was brilliant. Loved it. And then I retired because I'm an old lady, and I got myself then elected to Derry and Strawman District Council. I was involved in, I've always been involved in pro-life politics. Again, I think because when I worked in paediatrics in my training years, I spent a year in the Royal Maternity Hospital, the special care baby unit, it was called in those days, with these wee scraps of humanity that weren't ready to be born, that we had to kind of try and do the job their mum was doing until they were able to make it independently. Some did, some didn't. But for me, that certainly clarified the right to life and the human dignity that we all have from conception to natural death. So that was my kind of introduction, I suppose, to politics.
Yes.
And I've always been a political animal. Like, I was involved in Republican politics, Sinn Féin. I'm of a generation that lived through Bloody Sunday. I wasn't there, but I remember it's the first and only time I've seen my father crying. He came home from the march, and at that time it was they'd shot 2 people. That was the information that he brought home. And I remember watching him, just tears of frustration, I think, rather than he was just angry. And the day of the Bloody Sunday funerals, I the way you want to do something. I was 13 or 14, and I went up to Craigan Community Centre and washed cups for 7 hours for the visiting dignitaries. So as I say, all of that was there in the background. Then, as I say, after I retired, got elected to the council for an all-island party called Intu, and I was deputy leader of the party in the 32 counties and northern leader. And in the north, we had a superb organisation in each of the 6 counties, really good, strong people. And then came COVID, and very early on, I could see that what we were being told was incoherent, did not accord with anything that I had ever learned about respiratory infections as a doctor, and that the draconian response to it was completely disproportionate to the threat that it posed. The infection fatality rate was said to be much higher than it was. I mean, right from the start, we had figures from Johnny Anitas, Michael Levitt, the data from the Diamond Princess, the big cruise ship, that there was no excess mortality whatsoever. And the infection fatality rate, and at those times, don't forget, there were no tests, but was a fraction of 1%, right from the start. So this was never a highly infectious, contagious, dangerous pandemic. And as I say, there's so much you could say about that. The very definition of the word pandemic had been changed in preparation, I contend, for this event. So yeah, all of that. So then from 2020, I was making videos in my own house about the data, the papers that I was reading. Professor Dolores Cahill was sending me papers from a decade previously looking at mRNA technology and showing that it was unsafe for human use and that it had been shelved essentially as dangerous 10 years previously. And, just it became apparent that the lockdowns and the psychological manipulation of a population for essentially a non-event was there as a pretext for mass vaccination. That was apparent from 2020. I was making these videos, and then on
Just on that point there, you're saying about what it wasn't coherent. What were you seeing that didn't line up for you?
well, I was looking at the real life data. I was looking at the world data. I was looking at Sweden, who chose not to lock down, for example, and their mortality rates compared to here. And at that time, I was still comparatively an innocent abroad. And I was actually open to the idea of a spreading respiratory pathogen, which I now know absolutely was not the case. So that,
So
as I
when you
say,
say you now know, what is it that you know now that
well, we have worldwide data now, and that you have people like I'm going to blank on his name now. I was reading a paper he wrote last night, who's a mathematician and epidemiologist. You have the work of Carl Hennigan, and even right back then, there were people looking at the data and saying there was, there was no in 2020. It's important. The one fact that people need to know is, in no country across this beautiful planet was there excess all-cause mortality in that year. None. In Ireland, the mortality, all-cause mortality, was lower than it had been over the average 3 years previously.
so less people died
Less
over
people
that
died
year
that
in
year.
total?
And interestingly, in a couple of years before, there'd been a very severe flu pandemic. So after a severe flu pandemic, a bad dose of flu, so that whenever you have excess mortality in one year, you expect the mortality to be slightly lower the next year. Because if you like, it's a horrible phrase, but the low-hanging fruit, the people who were, the Grim Reaper was kind of waiting on, a lot of them succumb. And so therefore the next year you have a relatively healthier cohort of elderly people. So all of that, when you looked, and even factoring in all of those things, there was no pandemic. And you can see that this thing respected borders. Different countries along their border lines had different mortality outcomes. And in New York, for example, we can now know, looking back, that certain hospitals, the excess mortality was confined to certain hospitals. That's
Yeah,
bizarre.
yeah. Were they reporting though? They were reporting numbers and saying like X amount of people died from COVID.
Yeah, but again, I was reading the Department of Health circulars about what was a COVID death. If you fell off a ladder and coughed, that was COVID. That's a fact. It's hard to believe, but if you had a cough and a temperature, loss of taste and smell, there were 4 or 5 criteria. No matter what else was the matter with you, that was COVID. Seriously, you could not. It was
So
just
they were just putting it down if someone went into hospital with a different illness
whatever.
or
Stage 4 cancer was, if you coughed, you were a COVID patient. You were moved to the COVID ward, and there were these what I call death protocols. Now again, did the people implementing these protocols know? Almost certainly not. I mean, they were using, as we now know again, agricultural doses of Midazolam. I think, was it the Minister for Health? What's the British boy? It was something like 100 times the usual use of Midazolam over those months, in 2020. And there was a peak in mortality in April of that year, which I contend is due to not only the protocols, but the neglect of the population. The ordinary medical care was utterly withdrawn. So, yeah, I went back to work then in I think it was the summer
but
of
did you
2020.
yeah, oh sorry, continue. You went back to work. I was gonna say when you got suspended, what was the how did they reach out to you? What did they say in that moment?
Yeah, I have a story to tell about that. So I, as I say, was working as a counsellor, and I was retired. I had plans for retirement. I planned to spend a lot of time down in Northwest Golf Club there. I had planned to go and climb mountains and read a pile of books and do all the things that I never had time to when I was working and rearing four wains. And then the COVID event, Operation COVID, it was a military operation, which we can go into later. That happened, and the call went out for doctors to come and man the decks because the hospitals were overwhelmed, and this was a dreadful. And you know, at this stage, I had only recently retired, so I had all my accreditation up to date. I was still registered with the General Medical Council. I had my revalidation done. You know, I was still ready to go. So I applied, and they sent me back. And most of the work I was doing was in the out of hours centre. And what I saw was not a pandemic, but the complete and utter abandonment of the population. All healthcare was essentially withdrawn. And the protocols were that we were not allowed to see people face to face unless in case of emergency. So just an example, one of the first patients I saw, I worked in Western Urgent Care, which at that time was located in Great James's Street Health Centre in Derry. The GP surgeries weren't running as normal. So, as I say, whenever I was a GP, we used to see 30, 40 patients a day, do maybe a dozen phone calls, a couple of house calls. That was standard day's work for a GP. So the whole place was closed down. So we did the out of hours. This was during that, and then obviously it opened up again later on. But the out of hours centre, one of the first patients I saw, a mother phoned up. This would have been 6 to 12 during the week, and then 24 hours Saturday and Sunday. So I think it was a Saturday, and the mum phoned up and says, I have a wee boy here. I think he was 14 or 15, some age like that, teenager. And she says he's not well. And she said, I've been in touch with my own doctor about him 3 times, I think it was, during the week. And she said, he's just not well. And I was sort of going, well, can you tell me a bit more specific? She says, I can't. He's just not himself. There's something wrong. Now, as a doctor, if a mother is worried about a child, you see the child. Now, very often it's, the Wayne's dying. And they can walk into your surgery with a bag of Monster Munch, and you don't really even have to examine them. But everybody's reassured. You know, it's very quick to outrule something serious. So my instinct is to see it, especially if the mum is worried and she sounds rational. Anyway, I said, bring him over to the health centre. And within seconds, one of the administrators phoned down. Dr. McCloskey, you're not allowed to see children. I said, what? What? Oh, it's not an emergency? Excuse me, you're a receptionist. I'm the clinician here. If I say a child needs seen. Anyway, the Wayne came in, collapsed, navy blue, hyperventilating. I swear, I contend that if it hadn't been seen, that child would not have made it. Had undiagnosed type 1 diabetes, blood sugar of 30-something, needed red light at Delta McGalvin. And thank God, all was well. But that was the sort of thing that was contributing to the excess mortality, I contend. That's an extreme case, but certainly among the older population as well. I was out doing house calls. Again, I wasn't worried about contagion, so I was very happy to go to people's homes. But the first thing they said was, Doctor, I am not don't send me into hospital. I'm not going to hospital. I don't want to die on my own. And you'd be trying to say, well, look, you've got sepsis, you've a urinary, whatever, something minor that would respond to treatment. No, I'm not going to die on my own. I want to stay with. They wanted to stay with the person they'd shared their bed and their home with for 50 years or whatever, you know. And they made that decision. And some of them, I'm sure, again, didn't make it because they didn't get bog standard treatment, what would have been bog standard treatment 6 months previously. So I was looking at all of this, and I was going crazy. I swear to God, I didn't sleep. I didn't have a proper night's sleep for months, knowing that there was something wrong, and what can I do? So I resorted, as I say, to the old Samsung phone in the back room and started going through, you know, just the stats, the science, the international data, which by that time was coming through. Like, for example, this thing about asymptomatic transmission. In 2020, there was a paper published from Wuhan, China, of all places. 10 million people, the Chinese do their studies seriously, which showed clearly that asymptomatic transmission wasn't a thing. This is peer-reviewed, rock-solid science. And yet every time, oh, asymptomatic transmission, and you've got to get tested. You know, and if your test is positive, even if you're perfectly well, you're a threat to humanity. Utter nonsense. Looking back now, you're going, how do people believe that? And how people believed it was because it was the most sophisticated psychological operation which ever was carried out on the human race. Everywhere you looked, fear, separation. It was cult, the COVID cult. This cult of mask wearing, of changing how you behaved, of sanitizing, all these rituals that they made us go through. That's what it was. This has been researched, you know, how to get people to behave in a way. You take away their autonomy, you take away their choice, you take away their individuality, take away their freedom, and lie to them and pretend that they are a danger.
Why would they want to do that?
Because this is naked evil at the back of all of this. It's naked evil. And once you understand that, the whole thing becomes comprehensible. Now, it's taken me years to arrive at that position because, as I say, in 2020, I was tossing and turning and going, what is going on? None of this makes sense. And then, as a scientist and a doctor, I was able to research. I was able to source papers. I was able then to communicate with other professionals across the world, actually. Tess Laurie set up then the World Council for Health, and there were maybe a couple of dozen doctors across the world who had formed an alliance, and we were meeting online regularly, going through what was happening in our localities, and you know, that was really important. So that all of a sudden I wasn't a crazy woman in Derry on my own. I was a member, a very humble, an insignificant member, but of a global community of skeptics, but not uninformed skeptics. These were people who were among the most credentialed and qualified people on this planet, and who, very many of them, like me, suffered. But again, me suffering is irrelevant because, as I say, I had retired. I got my pension. I'd spent my pension. It was all good. You know, there was very little they could do to me. So, and even more, I felt that I had a responsibility to my colleagues to try and expose this and help them. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of the backstory. And then in I had talked about PCR tests. I talked about the PCR test utterly fraudulent, run at 45 cycles. It means they're looking for a sequence, a computer generated sequence, and I think they take snot from your nose and they compare it with a sequence from the snot of the patient A in China, I think, and they have these computer programs and they run it at 45 cycles, which is, you know, it's several trillion. They magnify the sample by several trillion and look for a short sequence in it. It's like looking for the word "the" in the collected works of Shakespeare. That's not science, like, it's bullshit. So, yeah.
Yeah, because there was a lot of people who would have tested positive with no symptoms. I mean, what does that even mean? Like, how can you be tested
Means absolutely
positive
nothing.
something?
We already showed asymptomatic transmission is not a thing. What that does is it takes people out of the workplace. It disrupts society. It pushes money. This is it. All of this is at the back of it all. Money is the root of all evil, and it was a financial scam to impoverish ordinary people, take middle class businesses away, and push all of that into the tech and online sector, and to impoverish middle and working class people, and to move. It's the biggest transfer of wealth. The whole Operation COVID was the biggest transfer of wealth from the pockets of ordinary, hardworking, individuals and families, to the corporate interests, to the billionaires, to the bankers, to the Black Rocks and State Streets and the rest. That's what it was.
Would a big pharma, they would have benefited then? Because they were the ones producing the vaccines?
Obviously, yeah, they are at the core. If you, again, whenever you, as I have now done, is research the whole history of allopathic medicine. The Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, all the big families are behind all of that, and it was. The Rockefellers were the, was a lot of these pharmaceuticals were made from the byproducts of their other business, which was big oil. So it's a good business model if you can work it out. They closed universities and medical schools that were teaching natural medicine and stuff like that, and insisted upon the allopathic model drugs, on test and then so most adults now. I mean, even as a GP, I used to be horrified. Most old people, or even people that are relatively well, are on 5, 6, 7, sometimes more medications. That's not normal. My granny lived to be 98 and she smoked a pipe and she chewed tobacco and she was great crack. And she lived with us. She never was near a doctor in her life. And she was a nothing except the odd bit of backy,
Yeah.
you know.
But
And
sometimes people, I think, are told, you have to take this now, and then they believe that,
yeah,
and then they become reliant on that,
yeah, yeah.
and then it just becomes a way of life instead
Again,
of.
to my deep shame, I knew there was something wrong, but even as a GP, it's very difficult to question. What happened in I think about mid 2000s with Tony Blair and New Labour, GPs got a new contract, and certainly my husband was a GP as well, and we were among the few who thought this is appalling, and it was all again moving towards the digital way of measuring things, and it was instead of, it used to be GPs were paid a capitation fee, so that you got whatever, a fiver or whatever per patient on your list, so that if you were not nice, if you didn't treat your patients with respect and and try and look after them, they went elsewhere, and rightly so. They voted with their feet. So it was kind of, if you like, it's a crude way of putting it, but you'd like to think you were motivated by care for humanity, and most of us were. But you had it, if you didn't behave, they went elsewhere, and it cost you financially. That all changed, and what happened was it became target driven, so that you had to have so many people on statins, you had to have the whole contraceptive services and stuff like that was again your part of your wages. Uh, uh, Things like diabetes, the targets had to be met for these various, with no evidence, absolutely no evidence base to show that outcomes were improved. And in fact, looking now, the evidence is extremely dodgy. And a lot of these things, like even now, if I see Malhotra, who's been calling out statins, you know,
Who?
he was an English cardiologist, and he's now on Trump, God blesses his health. I don't know what the American equivalent is,
Not
but
sure.
he's health guru. Uh, so he'd been calling out statins for a long time. I mean, these are toxins, but we were incentivized to prescribe these things, and again, it's a cycle because the big pharma sponsors the universities, funds the research papers, which obviously promote their products, and are very much involved in funding the regulatory bodies, and obviously generate income and then government revenue and all of that. They sponsor, the pharmaceutical industry. In America, I think they advertise on TV and all of this. So it's a self-perpetuating cycle of harm to patients. And as I say, when you're in the middle of it, it's difficult to see that.
Hmm.
The whole vaccine industry is another example. For example, at the time, I looked at Andrew Wakefield's work and I thought, is there anything to that? Now, again, I'm an old lady, and there's
Now,
two.
who is Andrew Wakefield?
He's a doctor who worked in England who was saying that the MMR vaccine was associated with autoimmune disorders like Crohn's disease and also with autism. He was correct. But at the time, I tried to look into that. But I, of course, went to our learned publications, the medical journals, the British Medical Journal, the Lancet, the GP, looking for objective evidence. In my naivety,
It,
these people are all paid by the people. In fact, the vaccine industry is trillions of pounds stroke dollars. You know,
because
it's huge.
let's just say there's someone listening now who has a child with autism. That might be hard for them to comprehend that a
Totally, yeah.
vaccine.
I couldn't agree more. It's hugely challenging, but the evidence, I think, first of all, it's important for people to understand that there is no vaccine on the face of this planet that was tested in a controlled, tested against a placebo. That is an absolutely inert, in other words, a saline shot. What they do is they test vaccines against other vaccines, which is not the same thing. And you can see even now there is still no examination of outcomes. For example, let's take the COVID vaccine. They refuse to look at the morbidity and mortality figures among the vaccinated as compared to people who have never been vaccinated with the COVID shot. Just, I'm not talking about the other childhood schedules. They will not look at that. And as I say, there is a control group, and the outcomes, the preliminary data from that is absolutely damning, but they will not look at it. There's massive, as I'm sure you could be aware from the work of Patrick Walsh, who's he's actually an accountant. He's from, is it Tipperary?
Not sure who he
Patrick
is.
E.
No.
Walsh, you'll get him on Substack. He's been working over the last couple of years producing phenomenal county by county data in the 26 counties and showing alarming increase in all-cause mortality, particularly, and this is the worrying part, among the lower age groups. So that is 25 to 40, that age group. That's the age group that don't die. They've a very low, they only, the things are road traffic accidents, suicide, those things. But generally speaking, that's the robust, healthy population who don't succumb to the usual things that kill people in their 80s. And they in every month, he can show that in every county, in almost every month since the rollout of the bioweapon, as I call it, there has been excess mortality right across this island. Significant, you're talking 15 to in some cases 30%. Shocking. Now the numbers are small because you're talking about a county, and I mean, as I say, that these are in the cohorts that you'd expect low mortality, but it's hugely significant. You will not get a single person in government to speak about it.
Why? Why would not one person in government speak about it?
In which bubble did you come up the foil, Ryan? They will not, because they push this poison upon their people.
But are you saying that some people in government would not be willing to speak about it?
None of them are. None of them are.
Is it because
They know because we've emailed them. In the north too, I emailed every MLA, every councillor. I wrote to all the regulatory bodies. I wrote to the insurance, the medical insurance companies. I wrote everybody, 2020. I wrote to the Minister for Health. I wrote to all the heads of the various health trusts. I have all these documents at home. I put them on notice of liability for harm and death, witnessed, and some of these are even, we've done notarized affidavits. All of that evidence is there. They would not look at it because it was not government policy. And as I say, back to my political career, I lasted for a couple of months into COVID, and the party and I were, shall we say, very different in the way that we want to treat this. And I had to resign, and I did say that if they locked Derry down again, the second lockdown, I said if that happened, I was going to resign. naively thinking that, you know, they might listen. So that, yeah. And again, in the council, at the beginning, people were saying to me, you know, I'm the only doctor and scientist in the council. And people were saying, well, what do you think about this? And I told them. And they sort of, ooh, don't want to hear. And then the party whip came into play. It's the most pernicious thing in politics is they don't even read papers. They just go to the party and say, what do you want us to think about this? You know, that's how government works.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Right. What was the main thing then that decided for them to suspend you? Like, what was
Okay.
that one thing?
So, as I say, I had been making these videos and people had reported me to the General Medical
Who was
Council.
reporting you?
Some of my colleagues in Derry, I know who they are and I have the screenshots. There was a wee virologist student in Cork who was from, I think, from Portstewart or something, had actually set up a Facebook page trying to get me struck off. This was all going on in the open, like. So that all of that was going on. But the GMC wrote to me and they said, look, Dr. McCloskey, yeah, we hear what you're saying, but we can't do anything because what you're saying is based on data and we have no authority to sanction you. That seemed to me perfectly reasonable. But then on the evening of the 21st of August 2021, it was an August Saturday evening, my timing was wonderful because it was the big jab weekend in the north when they opened all the GAA stadia and football stadia and leisure centres, trying to get as many young people as possible injected with this toxin. So I had worked a shift the previous Friday night and I'd worked that Saturday morning as well. And I saw several patients that I was absolutely sure had been injured. A very unusual case of a clot in the subclavian vein, which is the vein that goes under your collarbone and down into your arm. That's your subclavian area. I've never seen, you get clots in your legs, but I've never seen a young person. This is a young, fit woman with a clot like that, ever, in 40 years of medical practice. And I looked it up and it's vanishingly rare. She'd, and again, the adverse reactions were meant to be recorded on a yellow card and reported back to the MHRA. Now, we know since that the MHRA weren't interested in adverse effects, but that was required to be done. And that process was incredibly time consuming. It took 20 minutes per patient. Anyway, I saw a lady who had acute onset of Alzheimer's, actually a doctor's wife, interestingly, just overnight, completely lost her memory, again within days of getting the intervention. Now, again, cause and effect, difficult to say, but that required to be looked at, reported, investigated, and instead it was just, oh, these things happen. So I was going, and I knew that they were jagging Wayne. So I made this video and I described, and that was the first time I'd specifically talked about my clinical experience of what I considered to be vaccine harms. First time I'd made a video about that. I posted it at around mid-afternoon and it went everywhere. At that time, I still wasn't completely censored in Facebook as I am now, and X, Twitter it was in those days, and I did YouTube. Obviously, they never published any of this stuff. But so I posted that, and at 11:15 that night, the Saturday night, Professor Dr. Sir Michael McBride, who is the Chief Medical Officer advising the government in the north, so he was their Chief Medical Officer. He sent an email to his minions at 11:15 at night. We have all this. It took years to get this stuff through Freedom of Information and that. He sent it to the woman, Dr. Margaret O'Brien, who's the woman in charge of GP validation, or it's the performers list, it's called. So you need to be on the performers list to work as a GP. And to her sidekick, Moya McAlevey, to the General Medical Council, girl in Belfast, a girl called Jane Kennedy, to Joanne Hayman, who was the GMC Employment Liaison Officer in England, and to the media. You contacted some of the media people as well. This is 11 o'clock, a quarter past 11 at night. By that Monday morning at 10 o'clock, I was suspended. Now, that's sort of like 3 working hours later. So the NHS can be devastatingly efficient when it needs to be. And what happened was, they obviously looked at that and says, and this was the big jab weekend, and Michael McBride had just signed off, days before, on this protocol which allowed an unlicensed, the Pfizer BN2162B2 was being given in the north. At that time, it was an unlicensed product. And they were given that to children, to teenagers, to pregnant women. And I knew this. I knew it was unlicensed. And I said so. It was. And again, we have the documents, we have the protocols. McBride freaked. And I know why he freaked. He knew damn well what he was doing. This is it. You can give certain people plausible deniability, but not, I'm sorry, not Professor Sir Michael McBride. He had to have known. Chris Whitty in England, the same. Tony Holohan, the same. These people knew, but these people are in the pay, allegedly, of the pharmaceutical industry. Their job is to flag this stuff through. They knew I contend that they knew what they were doing. Don't forget, I had written to Michael McBride.
Have you spoke to any of them?
Are you mental? They wouldn't be seen in the same universe as me if they could. I'd written to them, all of them. I had written to them a fully referenced, evidence-based letter outlining the absolutely known harms of these things. I never got as much as an acknowledgement. My medical insurance company was one of the people that were included in this letter, and they did get back to me. I was saying these things are unlicensed, untested, they're in clinical trials. The question I was posing was, I had no intentions of ever giving them, but I says, as a GP, am I going to be covered? Am I going to be insured? Am I going to be indemnified if anybody comes to harm? And they were the only people who got back to me, and they said, yeah, essentially I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, you'll probably be all right. It certainly wasn't any more definite than that. So no, they knew. At the higher echelons of government, they knew.
Why did they not allow for open dialogue, open conversation if you have a point to bring to them?
Because I had the evidence.
And why were they not willing to listen to that?
Because that was not government policy. That was not the agenda. Don't forget this.
What is the agenda?
I think the agenda was to injure and harm and kill as many people as possible. Now that sounds really out there, but by their fruits ye shall know them.
And how do they benefit from that?
Because now this is with the encroaching technocracy, and this is why people need to be very clear with the encroaching technocracy. They will need fewer cattle, us. They will need fewer serfs than they have been used to. They won't need people to work in factories. They won't need people to mass produce their goods.
Is that because technology,
Absolutely,
robots will do all that, or what?
Yeah. And as I say, whenever you understand the forces behind this, it's the same forces that killed tens of millions of people in 2 world wars. It's the same forces that have, if you look at almost every evil going on in the world today, it's the same forces behind it. Look at what's happening in Gaza. Look at who's behind that. Look at what's happening in Sudan. Look who's behind it. The Anglo-American Empire, the Zionist entity who rule. Don't forget, America is ruled from Tel Aviv. That now is absolutely out there. That's evidenced. All of the movers and shakers of this have their alliance to, let's just say, an anti-human, anti-Christian, genocidal agenda. They hate and detest us, and they want us dead. And to me, there's no other rational explanation. And I understand that is way out there. But whenever you actually look, I'm reading a book at the moment called the Milner-Fabian. There's my friend Lily back. The
Lily.
Milner, she's all right. The Milner-Fabian conspiracy. And it goes through the way that the ground has been prepared for what happened in Operation COVID for literally centuries. This is the culmination of a plan that's been in place for a long time. And as I say, I'm fully understanding that a lot of people listening to this, if somebody had said this to me 5 years ago, I'd have gone, you need stronger tablets, pet.
Mm-hmm.
But as I say, it just look at what happened, look what is continuing to happen, and look at the way it's been covered up.
Yeah.
So what we have found, as I say, you started off by saying I've been suspended for another 12 months. Not one vicious tit could I give, but I am not going to let them. What they're doing is criminal and fraudulent.
And why is it criminal and fraudulent?
I'll tell you why it's criminal and fraudulent. First of all, I was speaking about informed consent, patient safety, and the right for people not to be injured by medical interventions. That's what I did was made a public interest disclosure video, as is allowed in law. And I am a whistleblower. Again, the General Medical Council, the regulatory body's own booklet called Good Medical Practice, says that whistleblowers are protected. That my duty, my first duty, I took a Hippocratic oath. University College Dublin, 18th of June, which is my birthday, and it's also my graduation day, 1981. I took an oath, not to government, not to health policy, not to bureaucracy. I took an oath to look after my patients, to do no harm, to put their needs first, to not procure abortion was in the oath in those days, and I still have stuck to that oath through my medical career. That's the oath I took. I did not take an oath to protect any government policy, good or bad, but particularly whenever to me it was absolutely clear that this was evil, and I use the word advisedly. So I should have been protected. But as I say, what we now know, and this has been, 2021 is now, it's 4.5, 5 years ago? No, not 4.5 years ago when I was suspended. Since then, I've been working a 12-hour day, writing affidavits. The other thing is that we'll get to the courts. But what I can clearly show now is that the regulatory bodies, the government, let's talk about the General Medical Council, and the Irish Medical Council is identical. I was down there recently, a colleague and friend of mine, because we skeptics kind of have grouped together so that I can name everybody in Ireland who's spoken out. Unfortunately, there's only 6 of us, but well, maybe 8. Marcus de Bruin was hauled before the Irish Medical Council. The procedures are the same.
Do you think more would want to speak out, and they're afraid?
Without doubt.
Do you know that?
That's why they made examples of us. I have no doubt about it. During the 2020 and into 2021, I had hospital consultants ringing me going, Anne, you need to make a video about this. You know, we're seeing this. I was going, lads, do you not think it would be more persuasive if a hospital consultant, if a cardiologist, if a transplant surgeon or whatever said this instead of just me, an old retired woman who was a GP and a very deprived, socioeconomically deprived, one of the most socioeconomically deprived areas in Europe? You know, would you not think you should do it? Oh, we can't. Oh, I have a mortgage. Oh, I have a family. And you look at people like Ahmed Malik. I was on the phone to Ahmed yesterday for the best part of an hour. Ahmed was an orthopaedic surgeon, top of his game, you know, working in private hospitals. And he spoke out, and like that, no one come. Yeah, you know, he hasn't been suspended. He actually handed his license back. But I'm a terrier, so I've been in the bull ring with them since.
Yeah, so you're not really being protected then, in general. Like people who he spoke out, he wasn't protected as such.
No, that was the reason that we were all suspended was for the General Medical Council, which is an arm of government, to say shut up. Do not speak about these issues. Otherwise, we will impoverish you. We will take away your ability to earn a living. We will make your family suffer. We will make your life unlivable. We will hold you up as pariahs. We will mock you. We will call you conspiracy theorists, all of that. And to be honest, I get frustrated at times going, why? I said, if 10 people 1 week, I'm just talking about, say, where I worked in the north of Ireland, if 10 people had said 1 week, right, we've had it, this is over, we're going to speak out, I do believe that the next week there would be 100.
Mm.
But it never happened because and I understand, I don't mean to be overly critical of people. People do what they do. The other interesting thing about medical education is when I was a young one, if you were not completely brain dead and got 3 A's or whatever in your A levels, 2 A's and a B or whatever, you went to university, your fees were paid by the government. You got in my case, I got a grant because we weren't particularly well off. And you come out of university qualified without a shilling of debt. No debt. Now the critters are coming out with 40, 50, maybe more, £1,000 of debt. So they it make, and I think all of this is done on purpose. That we have, generally speaking, degrees now, or people get degrees in grievance studies and all that they'll never get a wage from, they'll never be able to earn a living from, and yet they're burdened with debt, which means that they are a complete slave of the state. They're reliant on their whatever job or whatever. So yeah, I think that changed. And the other thing is, my mother, she actually got a scholarship to go to grammar school, but her money was needed at home back in the day, and she worked in the shirt factory in Tilly and Henderson's before she got married. She got married on her 36th birthday, but she worked there from she was a teenager. And she used to say to me, "Never you forget, girl, your degree was paid for by the workers of this town, the factory girls and the plasters and the plumbers. They're the people who paid for your degree. So don't you be coming here and acting like as if you know something." And to me, that was a really important lesson. Yeah. So, because you owe people something. Uh, um, and again, I think that the like of Tony Blair was instrumental in, it was all of a sudden it was education for everyone, but you have to pay for it yourself.
Why did they change that?
Again, I contend it's part of the agenda, because if you have, well, the other thing is a lot of the university education now is highly politicised. But I think it is that whenever you're in debt, then you're a slave. It's much more
They're
difficult.
profiting off your education. Basically, you're having to pay for an education.
Yeah, but it's worse than that. I think it's that these degrees. I mean, as a GP, I had a wee girl, and God bless her, she was. I'm not sure the child could read, and she was away to do a degree in psychology or something. You're going, what? You know, uh, but yeah, she was going to be paying for that, and she was going to come out presumably with a degree. I don't mean to be an intellectual snob, but I do think that standards in education have dropped horrifically. And then there has been this, the BC before computers, that everything now, I mean, the NHS, I have no idea what's happening. As I say, as a GP, it wasn't perfect, but it kind of worked, And okay, even when I was working, there were people whose families who had nothing were clubbing up to pay for a hip replacement or a knee replacement because their parents were in pain. That should have been available free of charge for people who'd paid taxes all their lives. But now all of that is completely withdrawn. The street, Spencer Road, in beside where I live, there's a private ambulance service, there's private scans, there's everything. People are being pushed into the private sector. And again, I think that's all on purpose. That the NHS is finished.
Mm.
And I think in a way COVID was the mechanism whereby that was achieved very quickly. My son now, who's the son of two retired GPs, has been trying for 6 weeks to get a doctor's appointment with his own doctor. 6 weeks. You know, and again,
Is it
what's wrong
because
with him is very little. He's an itchy skin rash or something. I don't discuss medicine with my family, but
yeah?
you know, it's nothing. But they
What's changed over the years? Are we not? Are they not? Is it not higher enough? Is there not enough people going into that career, or is
no,
the
there's
population?
probably I'm not now I'm not sure of the figures here.
Hmm.
I suspect there's as many doctors per head of population as ever there were, but it's just now that and you know, doctors have lost their autonomy, their decision making power. It's decision by algorithm, drop down menus. A lot of it now is being pushed online. If any of you have the NHS app, please delete it now from your phone. Do not interact with the health service and on both sides of the border in a digital form. You know, and it's a data harvesting thing as well. You know, so yeah, it's. I mean, like as I say, I'm 68 years of age, so you know, it's a long time since I went into general practice. But the difference between then, I'm beginning to sound like that the old man in a chair, Vernon Coleman, who was a GP. He's even older than I am, but you know, he talks about the way that it was patient centered, patient led, and the doctors were there as state paid carers, free at the point of service. That worked, and now that's gone. So it's yeah, it's profoundly depressing.
Have you noticed much of a change? I know there's a change, but like, say from when you started to now, what do you see that like? How do you see that looking? Even say in the next 10 to 20 years, do you see that getting
I
any
dread to think.
better?
I dread to think. Yeah, I think in 10 to 20 years. Well, I think in 6 months, a year, it's very likely that most of our health interactions will be with a screen. You'll type in your symptoms, and a prescription will be generated somewhere, and that'll be sent to your local chemist, and a drone will deliver it or something. No, I'm joking, but it's
I
you
mean,
know,
it could
it's
be a reality.
yeah, it's I think
It is
that's
kind of somewhat already. There's drones delivering stuff,
it's
and
completely
you
depersonal.
can.
Well, there's drones delivering death
Mm,
across the world as we speak. You know, I had an
is that
argument with my son about this recently because I was going, I can't even look at them because that impersonal way of delivering death to somebody is something that just
what is
freaks
death?
me out.
When you're saying
Well,
delivering
drones
death?
can target people and kill them. We know this.
Mm,
They're used in
war,
warfare,
yeah.
you know, so that it's like a computer game. And looking back, maybe a lot of these computer games were desensitize people into being able to kill someone using a button.
Mm,
You know, maybe because I used to look at the Waynes when they were wee shooting boys. And I was going, I couldn't do that, even to a cartoon image. It was just something that my generation maybe were sensitive to. I
It
don't know, like
when you said delivering death by drone, for some reason I thought of airplanes in the sky.
God no. I'm
No,
talking about
but
drone
the,
warfare.
apparently fuels coming out of planes. Have you heard about that? The chemtrails and
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a documentary on Prime. I haven't
Well,
seen it yet.
I never saw. As I
Don't
say,
know
I'm an
much
old
about
dog.
it, but
You look up at the sky on a summer morning. Not so much now, but this year, but certainly
mm,
last year.
yeah,
Tartan skies. Now in Derry, we've one airport. There's not a lot happens there. I'm talking about tartan skies.
mm,
You
yeah,
know, okay. I don't know what it is, but people who have looked into this are fairly sure that it is bio. These are more bioweapons.
yeah.
Again, it fits with that what I have learned. I don't know. I mean, haven't been up and analysed them, but
Do you think that's all part of what you're saying is like that agenda, that evil collective,
yeah,
all working together?
I do. I do. I would love to be proven wrong in this. You see, this is
Mm,
this is my dream that I wake up someday and the thing will be resolved and they'll go, Anne, you were talking wet for the last 5 years. Everything you said is wrong, and here's why. But nobody wants See, even in 2020, I had said I will debate on live radio in a forum of their choice, any hour of the day or night. I will debate this with the Minister for Health, with the Chief Medical Officer of Ireland, England, Scotland, or Wales, any of them. I will debate anywhere, in any fora, by any means, face to face, online, in a public hall, anywhere. I'll take them on.
And
Not,
nobody's responded.
no.
Again, are they number one afraid to take you on, or number two is it their silence goes against what they're supposed to do?
Both. Both. For example, yeah, going back to the General Medical Council, I mean, doctors have tried to argue with them using evidence. I mean, my reason for being suspended is not complying with public health guidelines. Taking, destroying the good name, essentially, of the medical, I can't remember the exact terminology, but the good name of the medical profession. But I can show that the public health guidelines are incorrect, harmful, dangerous, unlawful to give people unlicensed products that are in clinical trials. I can show that. But nobody will have that conversation. At the beginning in 2020, the local newspapers ran articles I wrote. You know, they gave fair prominence to what I was saying, is that this is not going to end well. And then all of a sudden that stopped.
Yeah.
And nobody would even talk to me. Nobody would take my phone calls.
So they've suspended you, but there hasn't actually been like a hearing or
Nope.
like a
Well,
or you both give evidence and prove your side of the story.
what happens is you have a thing called an interim order tribunal. It's worth maybe describing this to your listeners. So they suspend you, you can't work. But within 3 months, they must have a thing called an interim order tribunal. The Medical Act is very clear that the Medical Act 1983, and again, the legislation is the same in the south of the border, but I'm familiar with the situation in the north because I live across an imaginary line. Is it 3 miles up that direction? So yeah, the Medical Act is very clear that the registrar, who is a man called Charles Hamilton Massey, the registrar of the General Medical Council, must look at each case where the doctor is going to be, has been brought to their attention. He must evaluate the case and decide whether or not to refer it to an interim order tribunal. Then the interim order tribunal meet and they make an order. The clue is in the name, interim orders tribunal. In my case, no order was ever made by the interim order tribunal. That is unlawful. On its face, the thing should have been thrown out. I took this to the High Court in Belfast. And the judge, to be fair, said if there's no order, the thing can't stand. We have it in writing from the General Medical Council solicitors that there is no order. Never happened. So they have this interim order tribunal. You go to it. I gave them a 47-page, dense, evidence-packed, fully referenced document to show that everything I had said was correct in every way. They don't look at evidence. So again, in contravention of the law, the Bill of Rights, Magna Carta, and your inalienable rights, you cannot have forfeiture without a trial. And the forfeiture is loss of your livelihood, loss of your income, loss of your reputation. They can't do that without a trial, but they did. They will not look at evidence. So the interim order tribunal don't produce orders and don't look at evidence.
So what they're doing technically is fraud then?
It's criminal fraud, yeah, without a doubt. Well, it's especially without...
But that gives you more of in your case then?
Not at all. The thing is, it doesn't matter. Because what I'm saying is the General Medical Council, Charles Hamilton Massey, who's the CEO, he's appointed by the Privy Council, which is the oldest and most secretive part of His Majesty's government. The Privy Council is actually, see all the stuff that goes on in Parliament, all that shouting and roaring and baying and throwing things at one another, that's all theatre. The rules are made, the country, and this includes Ireland, because as I say, there is no republic, it never was. The border is a control device. We can go into that maybe in a different podcast because it's complicated. My friend is an MA in modern Irish history, and she and I have been collaborating very, very closely. She's a genius. As I say, she's the brains and I'm the mouth. But yeah, so the Privy Council and the City of London and the Bank of England, all of Ireland's gold, you know, is held in the Bank of England.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Why?
All of it's bullion, because there is no border. There is no. We do not have a republic. We do not have a free state. That's why it's called a free state. That has no legal strength. It's a makey uppy thing, you know. So the Privy Council appoints the head of the General Medical Council. Then the General Medical Council, they convene these interim order tribunals. There were 3 or 4 of them, and after 18 months, they must go to the High Court in order to extend the suspension more than 18 months. So they went to the High Court. At this stage, I'd been through several solicitors' firms who were going to fight this for me because your medical insurance covers you. But none of them wanted to challenge it. They wanted me to go and grovel and apologise and say I was wrong and say that, oh, please give me my licence back and I'll be good. And sorry, I'm a McCloskey. That was never going to happen. That was never going to happen. Because, again, it's not about me. This is about people. It's about my colleagues as well. If the government can censor a doctor who's trying to protect her patients, then we live in a totalitarian state. And that's what happened. So just come back to the thing, because this is really important. The General Medical Council is appointed essentially by the Privy Council. They then, after 18 months, go to the High Court, and the High Court then decides whether they can extend it further. Now, don't forget, there's been no evidence heard. So I went to the High Court after sacking the lawyers and stood on my own 2 feet and told them there is no order. And as I say, the first judge says, well, if there's no order, we can't extend an order that doesn't exist. But the courts and the regulatory bodies are the same. This is a seamless garment. I won that court case hands down. We had 9 notarized, witnessed, signed and sealed, unrebutted affidavits put into the High Court, wall to wall with evidence, not so much about the medical aspects, but the legal aspects, the law, what is required in law of the regulatory bodies. I don't even think there's any evidence the judge read it. His verdict, saying they could extend my suspension, had bore no relation to the arguments we had made in the court, essentially.
Lily, done. Well,
Lily, you have to go.
Done, yeah.
She wants to be a film star. So yeah, then you have to move on. So as I say, the High Court thing was a complete charade. What happened then, and you'll be familiar with some aspects of this story, we appealed it. The day that he gave the judgment, I said, I'm appealing this. And immediately I started getting stuff from the magistrates' courts about COVID violations. You know, you couldn't make this up. So Derry, I spoke at a public meeting. That was years previously. These were time expired. They have to bring these within 6 months. But all this stuff, paperwork started landing. With the name in the paperwork being an entity that doesn't exist, my name on the medical register is Dr. Mary Ann McCloskey, date of birth, 18th of June. It's my birthday. This entity was Ann McCloskey, date of birth, 1st of June. Again, a fake entity. It's not me. So this stuff all started appearing. But in the meantime, I had said
You think they meant to do that?
Absolutely.
Why?
Absolutely.
So
because they are criminals. It's just that simple. There's no other way of doing it. None of this is an accident. They knew that what I was saying is true, and they had to shut me up. So the GMC, as I say, don't forget, the science has evolved a lot, and people now are coming to a realisation that a lot of the stuff that was done during COVID was deliberately harmful to the population. And I'm talking about even lockdowns, mask wearing, all of that. There's overwhelming evidence that all this stuff had the opposite effect to what it was intended. So anyway, as I say, I said I was going to appeal the High Court judgment, and immediately I started getting these things about criminal cases and whatever. Then I put in papers for an appeal. We had a couple of preliminary meetings. But in the meantime, my beloved brother, who lives not a 1,000 miles away from here, had a very aggressive form of cancer and was dying. So the Medical Practitioners Tribunal Service, then they have to have a case then to extend it again after the High Court thing. And the appeal, meantime, was on the back burner, and it was progressing. And, you know, but they insisted that the MPTS, I put in sick lines, including from a professor of psychiatry in London, who said this girl cannot be expected to attend a medical practitioner's tribunal while her sibling is in terminally ill and in Foyle Hospice. So this was, and they insisted upon going ahead. I mean, it was inhumane. It was unreal that, you know, that all of this was going on in my family life, and I was expected to prepare and put in paperwork for a tribunal. It was beyond belief. This is supposed to be a medical organisation that's involved in healthcare. So anyway, they held the tribunal anyway on the 15th of October, I think it was, of 2023, and my brother died in November. I didn't go, wasn't represented. I've been presenting myself at all these anyway, because, as I say, the lawyers are on the same side. The whole thing is that the lawyers all get paid and nothing changes. So the medical, they went ahead, and immediately then you had the High Court, the appeal court judges saying, oh, well, we aren't going to hear this appeal because it is moot. It's irrelevant. So what they were essentially saying is that the Medical Practitioners Tribunal had superior jurisdiction to the High Court and the Court of Appeal in Belfast. This is Alice in Wonderland stuff. It's absolutely ludicrous. But that's what they said. The appeal has never been heard. I paid, I think, 650 quid to get it heard. But all of this is open. This is fraud. This is absolute fraud. It's criminality and it's fraud. And I'm going to challenge it until my last breath. Mm-hmm. So the appeal has never been heard. I'm still suspended. The other important thing is the Medical Practitioners Tribunal Service is a committee of the GMC. They pretend to be independent. They actually have a different address. But they're all GMC employees. If you go into the GMC website, these people are all employed by the General Medical Council. They are the same thing. They are joined at the hip. And interestingly, the most sort of famous inquiry that was ever held by the General Medical Council was into Harold Shipman. Do you remember him, the boy that he did arsenic and Old Lace? He killed a whole pile of his elderly patients.
No.
He overdosed them on morphine and stuff like that.
No.
You know, it was a huge case at the time.
Where was this?
In England.
Okay.
So they had a big case. But the outcome of all of that inquiry was that the GMC, the General Medical Council, and the Medical Practitioners Tribunal Service the recommendation was that they should become absolutely separate. That never happened. They are joined at the hip. The GMC as well, just to give you an idea of what's going on, employs 2 full-time doctors on its staff and 98 solicitors. So you may know where their priorities are. It's about litigation. It's about the law, except that they ignore the law when it suits them.
Yes.
So that's the MPTS. And then you have the magistrates' courts who took this fake entity and actually convicted me of what weren't crimes in the first place, like walking on a beach in Benone Strand and speaking at an outdoor rally in Derry. I'm the only person who, as far as I'm aware, has been taken to court, fined, and indeed in the Derry case imprisoned. I did 2 days in Her Majesty's prison, Hydebank, because I wouldn't pay their fine because it's fraud. The paperwork is fraudulent. The entity that issues the arrest warrants doesn't exist. The director of the Public Prosecution Service for Northern Ireland doesn't exist. We have FOIs to the Ministry of Justice.
What's an FOI?
Freedom of Information. To the Lady Chief Justice, the Minister for Justice, the Department of Justice, the Attorney General, Chief Constable. Do you hold information on this entity, the Director of the Public Prosecution Service for Northern Ireland? None of them hold any information on it because there's no such thing. The moving party has to be the Director of Public Prosecutions. That is a corporation sole. This is all about technical, but it's dead important. This is fraud, provably so. I have all the receipts. It's really interesting. Like, life has not been boring. But anyway, yeah. So they convicted me of these 2 COVID crimes. And then the other one that the MPTS deliberated on last week is that I was misbehaving in court. Now, the judge in that case wasn't a judge. He was a barrister from Newton Abbey or something that they wheeled up to Coleraine for the day. I stood up in the court at the beginning and said, I have never given them jurisdiction. I've never gone into the witness box. I've been challenging them from the spectators bench, I call them. And I've had a bunch of, really dedicated people who were prepared to turn up. The High Court was packed, and I really can't be, I'm so grateful to them for the moral support and the fact that they were there to witness all of this. So I stood up in Coleraine and told Christopher Holmes, I said, allow me to introduce myself to the court. My name is Mary Ann, and I am the executor, settler and beneficiary of the commercial title Dr. Mary Ann McCloskey. He freaked. He shouted, shut up, sit down. And I continued saying what I was saying, and he ran out of the court and then came back, put me in the cells for the afternoon. This is how serious these people are. Locked me up for the afternoon with the staff the security staff were going, what is going on here? They said to me, what happened? I told them my name. They locked me up, and then he brought me out and tried to make me contract. He says, I don't know what to do with you. Will I send you to jail or will I fine you 50 quid? I just laughed at him because that's a false binary. I'm not going to choose because then you contract with him. I just laughed at him. So he says, I'm going to fine you 50 quid because it's very expensive to send someone to jail. And that now is part of what the General Medical Council are investigating. Now, they're not going to say what happened in the court. They're saying that his fraudulent paperwork said that I was guilty of a crime. This is how it works. That's how the system works. You can't win inside that system. So,
yeah, this comes back to, I suppose you just don't, it's up to you whether you agree with it or not. Sounds like you don't agree with the system.
do you know what? I've come too far. I have no, I don't mean to sound like a martyr or anything. I don't care what happens to me. They can do whatever. As I say, they put me in jail. Interestingly, the judge, Barney McElhone in Derry, retired prematurely shortly after that because, again, and then I was meant to get a fortnight, and so that would have been a week for good behaviour. Mm-hmm. But after 2 days, the governor and the wee girl, the staff were lovely. They were really just incredible. A lot of the women there should have been in hospital, or just somebody should be looking after them. A lot of them should be at home with their children. Social services were involved in a lot of their cases in a very bad way. I heard their stories that would take tears from a stone. Yeah. But anyway, so on the second day, with 2 nights, the third day, I'd been in Coleraine custody suite overnight. They drove me from Derry to Coleraine for a case to be heard in Derry, so they'd have to do it in a digital court. And then I was assaulted in the cell by a policeman because he muted the thing and I tried to turn it on again. Like, this is nuts. And but the governor anyway said, we can't keep you any longer. This is on day 3 or day 2 of my imprisonment. I said, well, he says, we've no authority to keep you. And I said, well, you've no authority to throw me out either because I wouldn't go. I said, he said, somebody paid your fine. I said, well, show me the receipt. Show me who paid my fine. He says, we don't know. I said, well, somebody must know. So obviously it had to be paid to the court in Derry. We asked the court in Derry who paid the fine. They have no record of my fine. My fine wasn't paid. They decided, because there was going to be a big protest in Derry, at Maghaberry, or at Hydebank Women's Prison on that Saturday afternoon. And there probably would have been thousands there. I think they didn't want that. They didn't want the publicity around that. I don't know. But anyway, it was really bizarre, me arguing with the governor that he had no authority to throw me out and him saying, well, I have no authority to keep you. I think he was going, this woman is weird. But that was what happened. And then the following Saturday, I was up in Foyleside Shopping Centre, and this woman young one roared at me across the stairwell, Dr. Ann, they let me out too. Just going, class. Yeah, life hasn't been boring.
No, it sounds like from me speaking to you, the reason you do what you do is because you truly care about people. You know, you truly care about people, and that has been your reason to fight for what you fight for. You truly care about people. And I think people sometimes think or believe that the government really care about people. And I have no doubt that there are people in government who do care about people, but at the true root
Well, the
of
ones
it,
who care about people are craven cowards. The ones at the top are evil.
yeah,
Sorry, your government hates you and they want you dead.
yeah,
Once you get that into your head, it makes things make a
yeah.
lot more sense. And again, but don't forget, as I say, the government, that crowd in Dublin, they're sock puppets. They're absolutely owned and controlled.
Lily, come
Yeah.
on, sit.
Lily wants, Lily, come on, don't listen to him. No, she's looking all. Yeah. No, the thing about caring about people is, well, I would like to think that that's the motivation. You know, I do. My parents, like, were devout Catholics. They were both in St. Vincent de Paul. You know, we at Christmas time always had a house full of toys for the St. Vincent de Paul. You know, and if we found our toys, they said they were for St. Vincent de Paul. Do you know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
just that kind of a good, not just a decent people. Don't forget, all the people you meet are great people.
Yeah.
Most people are dead. People don't want to hurt one another. Generally speaking, the numbers of people that have real badness in them are few and far between.
Yeah.
But there's that. So there's that thing. But there's also that I would be pig-headed, like. And the people I'm working with, I've been so privileged that I've met some of the most capable and hard-working people who have the same motivation. This is not about me. I have grandchildren. It's about them. It's about what sort of world you young people are going to live in. It's about, I'd be looking at what's going on in Gaza, just going every day, what can I do that might change that? What can I do to stop people injuring pregnant women and babies? You know, it's no choice. And as I say, this has been personally costly, not about the GMC or whatever, because as I say, I wouldn't take my licence back, but I'm not letting them take it from me without a fight.
Yeah.
But, you know, my family life, there's been conflict. And again, the whole COVID thing has caused that type of disruption across society. You know, again, it's evil beyond comprehension.
Yeah.
And in a way, as I say, I was reared and, you know, did all the sacraments and got married in the Catholic Church and all that. But then, yeah, brought my family to Mass and did the saluting parts, as they say. But I certainly didn't lead an exemplary life, far from it. But this has made me understand that whenever you see naked evil, then there's only one counter to that, and that is get on your knees and try and get the angels and the saints on your side. And this is the month of November, the faithful departed, praying for my parents, but to them. Use your influence. We need help here, because we got to take sides in this. We've got to take sides. You know, and for me, it's a clear fork in the road. And as I say, in ways, that's why again I have no fear, none.
I think it's important to have your faith and your belief. Yeah, 100%.
There you go.
Anne, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here today. I think we've covered a lot of stuff.
I've enjoyed the
Very interesting.
conversation. You didn't get saying very much, but as I say, it's a
not
story
it's not my-
that's
It's
sort
not my
of.
place to talk. You
Yeah.
know, I like to provide a space for other people to come and share.
Well, I do think that the perspective I have is something that it equips people better to, if they understand the way that thing works, it kind of, it equips people. And you know, again, as I say, we are the many, they are the few. You know, it's a great
Yes,
song was going about,
that's
we are
so
the
true.
99%. It's actually more.
Yeah,
We're 99.99.
yeah,
And we also have all the aces, because we have the good people. we have the capable people, and we have the heavenly hosts on our side. So whatever happens, bring it on.
Yep.
It's all good.
Thank you very much, Anne.
Not at all. It was a
Been
pleasure.
great. Thank you.